There are moments when time freezes, and one of them is staring down at a dying lion cub, soaked in black oil, barely breathing. No cries, no struggle, just fading golden eyes, waiting to disappear. Raphael, a man haunted by a past where being 3 minutes too late cost a life, stood at the edge of that pit with a choice no one ever wants to make: walk away or jump in. And then he did something no one expected. The wind had teeth that morning. It tore through the canyons of northern Chile's Atacama like a thing alive, dry, hot, and whispering of old fires. Rafael Mendez wiped sweat from his brow and shaded his eyes against the merciless sun. A former firefighter turned wanderer, he had been driving for 3 days through dead roads and abandoned mining fields, chasing nothing but the silence. The heat distorted the landscape ahead, where an old, half-collapsed ranger post loomed like a mirage. He pulled over. The place looked forgotten. A metal sign swung limply from one hinge, creaking with each gust. The old station hadn't been used in years, yet something about it felt oddly familiar, like a grave that still smelled faintly of its occupant. Raphael stepped out of his truck, boots crunching on the brittle, sun-bleached ground. He needed a break, water, shade, anything. He had barely walked 10 paces toward the broken steps when a voice rang out behind him, sharp and commanding. "Don't move!" He turned slowly. A woman stood 10 yards back, hand resting on a sidearm holstered at her hip. She wore a tan ranger's vest, dusty cargo pants, and a glare that could carve stone. Her face was sunburned, jaw set hard beneath dark glasses. "This is protected land," she said. "You're trespassing." "I didn't see any signs," Raphael said calmly, raising his hands just slightly. "Just trying to get out of the sun." She took a few steps closer, eyes narrowing. "You alone?" He nodded. "Yes, I'm just passing through." "You've got no idea where you are, do you?" she muttered. "The old Escondida dump site's 1/2 mile from here. People don't just pass through here without a reason." There was something about the way she said it, half suspicion, half fatigue, that struck him. This wasn't the first time she'd confronted someone like this. Probably not even the first this month. He didn't blame her. Before either could say more, a sound sliced through the still air. It was faint, barely there. A wet, irregular breath, like lungs too tired to keep going, but too stubborn to stop. Raphael froze. The ranger, Amara, he caught from the faded patch on her vest, tilted her head. "You hear that?" she asked, low. Another breath, raspier this time. Then silence. They both moved, wordlessly, scanning the area. The sound had come from behind the ranger post, where rusted pipes jutted out of the cracked earth like ribs. Amara led the way. Her boots were quicker. She'd done this before. Around the back of the station, the land dipped into a shallow basin, man-made and lined with cracked concrete. The wind carried the smell before the site hit them. Crude oil, thick and black, baking under the sun. It clung to everything, walls, rusted debris, even the light. But what drew Raphael's eye wasn't the pool itself. It was the shape at its center. A mound, small and black, barely visible against the shimmering surface. It wasn't moving, but it was breathing, barely. Amara sucked in a sharp breath. Oh my God! They crept closer to the edge. The pool was about 15 feet across, the walls steep and crumbling. At first, it looked like a lump of melted plastic or a pile of garbage dumped into the sludge. But then Raphael saw the shape shift, just slightly, and caught the glint of gold beneath the tar. Ears. Tiny, twitching ears. "It's a cub," Amara whispered. He nodded, heart thudding. "Lion." The animal was nearly unrecognizable, coated in oil so completely it looked sculpted from the stuff. One paw twitched, then stillness again. The breathing was shallow, faint, slower than it should have been. Raphael knelt at the edge, ignoring the oil-stained gravel that crumbled beneath his knees. He counted. 1, 2, pause, 3. It wasn't right. The cub was drowning in poison, but still fighting. Or maybe not fighting anymore, just waiting, enduring. He knew that feeling. She must have fallen in. There's no way up. And there's no mother in sight, Amara said, scanning the horizon. She's probably been in there for days. Raphael stared at the slick black fur, the raw stillness, and felt something rise in his chest that hadn't stirred in years. 3 minutes. That's how late he'd been the day Mateo died. His baby brother, gas leak, explosion. Raphael stuck in traffic with a busted comm line and a panic that wouldn't end. 3 minutes, enough to lose everything. "Help me," he said suddenly. Amara turned. "What?" "I'm going down." "Wait, what?" "No, that's industrial waste. You'll suffocate in there. You don't have equipment. You'll die." He stood up, already pulling rope from the back of his pack. Old climbing gear, weathered but reliable. "She's alive." "She's dying." "Then I'd better hurry." She stepped in front of him, hand on his Eusky chest. "Listen, I'm a ranger. If you die in there, that's on me. You want to help? Let me call in rescue." "Too late," Raphael said quietly. "She's got minutes. Maybe less. I know what too late looks like." Their eyes locked, and Amara, trained, armed by the book Amara, saw something behind his calm that made her step aside. The next few minutes passed in silence. Raphael secured the rope to the base of a steel post embedded in the concrete. It groaned, but held. Amara tested the knot, wordless, efficient. Then he lowered himself down. The oil hit his lungs first. Even without touching it, the smell clawed at his throat, clung to the inside of his nose. When his boots sank into the sludge, it pulled at him like a living thing. Sticky, cold, relentless. He forced himself forward. The cub was close. 10 feet, then 8. At 5 feet, he stopped. Her eyes were open, barely. 2 golden flecks, dulled by pain and chemical sting, flicked up at him. There was no fear, no struggle, just the distant recognition of something alive standing close as death circled. He reached out and touched her. The oil made it feel like touching rubber, unnatural, inhuman. But beneath the slime, he felt bone, fur, a heartbeat, slow and staggering. She didn't move, didn't resist, didn't care. He slid his arms beneath her, cradled her body to his chest, ignoring the way the oil soaked into his clothes and skin. It felt like holding a body already dead. But she was breathing. And that was enough. With a grunt he turned, wading back toward the wall, her weight against his chest. The oil clung harder now, reluctant to let go of its prey. He felt it drag at his boots, heard the wet sound of each step. He reached the rope. He couldn't climb one-handed, couldn't let her go. He looked up. Amara was leaning over the edge, eyes wide. Their gazes met. She nodded once, then disappeared. A moment later, the rope jerked, pulled tight. Raphael wrapped the lion cub in his arms, secured her against his chest with a belt from his pack, and began to climb. It wasn't graceful. His arms burned. The soles of his boots slipped. Oil smeared the wall, made every foothold treacherous. But Amara pulled as he climbed, easing the weight. At the top he collapsed. The cub lay motionless on his chest. The oil had begun to dry, thick and sticky like tar. Her eyes were closed again. The breathing, still there, barely. Amara knelt beside him, stunned. "We need to clean her," Raphael gasped. "Now." She didn't argue, didn't ask why. She just moved. They wrapped the cub in an old emergency tarp, loaded her into Raphael's truck, and drove, fast and silent, toward the nearest outpost with water. No one spoke for miles, but in the back seat, between rattling gear and stained towels, a cub began to breathe. Shallow, slow, but still breathing. It was not a miracle. Not yet. But it was enough. The truck's suspension groaned under the weight of silence. Raphael kept his eyes fixed on the cub wrapped in the tarp beside him, barely aware of the road stretching ahead through dust and stone. Amara was driving now, jaw clenched, knuckles white around the steering wheel. The sun burned low behind them, painting the mountains in a copper light that looked more like fire than warmth. Solea wasn't moving. The name had slipped from his mouth without thinking. Solea, the lonely one? It suited her. A life reduced to a breath, floating in a pit no one was meant to survive. Raphael had seen death before. He'd carried it out of burning buildings and cradled it in his arms. But never had he pulled it from a pool of oil and watched it try to remember what living felt like. The wind whipped through the cracked windows, carrying the stench of crude oil and iron, the kind of smell that stuck in your throat, crawled up your sinuses and refused to leave. "She's cold," Raphael said. Quietly. Amara glanced over. "I told you we should have radioed this in." "You told me we didn't have time." She said nothing to that. He adjusted the towel around the cub, trying to hold her closer without pressing too hard. Her breathing came in thin pulls. Every few seconds her body would twitch, tiny reflexive motions like a dream she couldn't escape. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Old ranger outpost, maintenance site about 5 miles east. It has a pump and maybe some gear left behind. I've used it before." He nodded. That was enough. He couldn't think any further than that. Minutes passed. Then another sound, a sharp gasp. The cub's body seized slightly in his arms, her back arched, legs stiffened. "She's crashing," he said. "I see it," Amara muttered, pushing the accelerator. The outpost appeared like a ghost behind a curve of jagged rock, just a small concrete box with a tin roof and a leaning tower beside it. A rusted door, no windows, a place built to be functional, not safe. They stopped hard. Raphael was out of the truck before the engine died. He carried the cub with both arms like a wounded child, following Amara into the building. Inside, the air was stale but cooler, thick with the scent of old oil and dust. "Table?" he said. Amara cleared one with a sweep of her arm, sending tools clattering to the ground. Raphael laid the cub down gently, unwrapped her just enough to expose her chest. The oil had stiffened around her fur again, dried by the wind and sun. He could see the curve of her ribs, each breath stretching her skin thin. "We need to clean her," he said. "I'll find water." Amara moved fast, opening cabinets, checking tanks. She grunted in frustration. "Nothing potable." "I don't care if it's drinkable." A moment later, she came back with a plastic bucket half full of cloudy water. "Found it in a sealed barrel. Rainwater probably. Not clean." Raphael didn't wait. He dipped a cloth in the water and began wiping gently around the cub's mouth, her eyes, her ears. The black sludge smeared under his fingers, refusing to release her. "Is she poisoned?" he asked. "Almost certainly." "Can we fix it?" "Not all of it," Amara said, "but maybe enough." Raphael glanced at her. "You've done this before." She looked away. "Once. Not like this." He said nothing, focusing on her paws now. Tiny things, curled into themselves, claws caked with oil and blood. He cleaned between each toe, feeling her twitch in response. It wasn't much, but it was something. They worked for an hour, silent except for the scrape of water, the soft rasp of cloth, and the cub's shallow breaths. Outside, the wind howled. The world had narrowed to this single room, this single moment, this single creature clinging to the space between dying and not yet. When they paused to catch their breath, Amara asked the question he'd been avoiding. "What were you doing out there?" Raphael didn't answer right away. "I used to be a firefighter," he said finally. "Before everything." She waited. He didn't explain. Instead, he stared at the cub. "She remind you of someone?" Amara asked. Raphael didn't speak, didn't nod, but his silence was an answer. The cub coughed suddenly, dry, sharp, painful. A tiny bubble of black fluid gathered at the corner of her mouth. Amara stepped forward with a clean cloth. "She's trying," she said. "Trying won't be enough." Amara looked at him. "So we give her more." She pulled something from her pocket, a small packet of electrolyte powder. "Emergency use only." "This'll help rehydrate," she said. "Mix it with water. Give her a few drops at a time." Raphael took the packet. His hands were shaking again. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You don't even know me." Amara looked tired. "Because I've seen what happens when people walk away." He looked down at the cub again. Her eyelids fluttered, just barely. A slow blink. "We don't walk away," he whispered. Amara nodded. "No, we don't." They stayed that way for the rest of the night, alternating shifts, giving drops of water, wiping down fur, checking her breathing. Somewhere along the way, the cub began to shiver. That, Amara said, was good. It meant her body was fighting again. At dawn, the first real sound came from her. Not a growl, not a cry. Just a rasping, broken sigh that sounded almost like relief. Raphael exhaled with her, his forehead resting against the edge of the table. Not this time. By the time the first light crept over the ridge, the maintenance outpost smelled like soap, metal, and something darker that didn't belong in any building meant for humans. Oil. It was everywhere. In the folds of the tarp, in the cracks of the workbench. On Raphael's hands, no matter how many times he wiped them on his jeans. It clung like a curse, the kind you carried home without realizing it, until you looked in the mirror and saw it still on you. Solea lay on the table wrapped in an old towel, her tiny body rising and falling with breaths that were finally more regular than they had been the day before. Not normal, not safe, but real. Amara stood at the sink, pumping water into a metal basin. The water came out cloudy at first, then cleared just enough to use. She didn't speak while she worked, neither did Raphael. Their silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that formed when words could waste time. Raphael leaned closer to the cub, watching her ribs. 1, 2, 3. He exhaled slowly, then reached for the cloth again. The oil on her face had thinned overnight, revealing the faint outline of whiskers and the soft curve of her muzzle. She was still stained in places, especially along her neck and shoulders where the crude had baked into the fur. But under it she was gold, a lion cub, a real one. Amara returned to the table and set down a small plastic bottle. "This is all I've got," she said. "Saline, for eyes. It's expired, but it's better than nothing." Raphael nodded. "Thank you." Amara hesitated, then asked the question she'd been holding back since the pit. "You weren't thinking when you went down there," she said. "That wasn't bravery? That was something else." Raphael kept his eyes on Solea. It was urgency. Amara crossed her arms. "That's not an answer." Raphael's jaw tightened. He didn't want to open the door inside him. He'd spent years building it, reinforcing it, pretending it didn't exist. But the cub's breathing was in the room with them, and it made honesty feel unavoidable. "I was late once," he said quietly. Amara didn't interrupt. Raphael swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. 3 minutes, that's all it was. 3 minutes that turned into the rest of my life. Amara's expression softened just slightly, like a fist unclenching. Raphael kept talking because if he stopped, he might not start again. "My brother Mateo," he said. "He was 12. There was a gas leak in our apartment building. A small one at first, the kind you don't think will become anything." His hands paused on the towel. He stared at the cub's paw, so small it barely seemed possible it could ever grow into something powerful. "I was supposed to pick him up from school," Raphael continued. "I got stuck behind an accident. I kept calling. No answer. Then I got a message from a neighbor. Just one sentence. There's smoke." He blinked hard, forcing himself to stay in the room. "When I got there, the building was already surrounded. People screaming, sirens, firefighters I used to work with. And I remember thinking, I'm finally here. I made it." His voice dropped. But he was already gone. Amara looked down at the floor as if she could see that moment in the dust. Raphael's mouth tightened. 3 minutes. That's all it took. After that, everything I did felt pointless. Every rescue felt like I was trying to pay a debt that couldn't be paid. He touched Soleia's shoulder gently, the way you touched something you were afraid might disappear. "And then I saw her," he said, "in that oil, and it felt like the universe was holding out the same moment again, asking what I was going to do this time." Amara let out a slow breath. "So you went down?" Raphael nodded once. "I went down." They fell quiet again. Outside, the wind rattled the door. Somewhere, far off, a bird called, one lonely sound, in a land that didn't seem built for life. Amara moved first. She opened a small supply crate and pulled out a faded thermal blanket. "We need to keep her warm," she said. "Oil messes with temperature, and shock will kill her faster than hunger." Raphael helped her slide the blanket under Soleia's body. The cub twitched faintly, then settled. Her eyes stayed closed, but her breathing deepened by a fraction, like her body recognized safety, even if her mind didn't. Amara reached into her vest pocket again and pulled out another packet, high-calorie emergency gel, the kind hikers used. "I shouldn't," she murmured. "It's expensive, but—" Raphael gave her a look. "Use it." Amara mixed a tiny smear into warm water and drew it into the syringe. She knelt beside Soleia's head, touched the tip to her mouth. 1 drop. Soleia's tongue moved. Barely. 2 drops. A swallow. Raphael's chest tightened. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath until it came out in a shaky exhale. "She's taking it," he whispered. Amara nodded. "Good. Slow. Don't push too hard." They repeated it every few minutes, patient and careful, like feeding a fragile secret back into the world. An hour later, Soleia coughed again. This time it was weaker, but it brought up a thin smear of black fluid onto the towel. Amara's eyes widened. "That's good," she said quickly. "That means it's leaving her." Raphael stared at the stain like it was proof that miracles could be messy and still count. Amara wiped Soleia's mouth, then sat back on her heels. "We can't keep her here forever," she said. "This place isn't safe. No radio signal, no medical equipment, and if anyone comes looking—" Raphael's gaze lifted. "Someone will?" Amara's face hardened. "I don't know, but the pit you found her in? That's not old waste, not all of it. I've been seeing fresh tracks, out there. Fresh dumping, fresh damage." Raphael felt a coldness crawl up his spine. "You think someone's still using it?" "I know someone is," Amara said. "And if they see a truck they don't recognize near their mess, they'll want to know why." Raphael glanced at the door, suddenly aware of how thin the walls were, how exposed they were in the open desert. "And you still patrol that area?" he said. Amara gave a humorless smile. "It's my job." Raphael studied her, seeing the exhaustion under her strength. Why do you keep doing it? Amara's eyes flicked to Soleil. Because the animals can't file reports, she said, and because I used to be the kind of person who believed rules always protected the innocent. Raphael waited. Amara's voice lowered. They don't? That was all she said, but it was enough. Raphael understood it, the way you understood a scar without seeing how it happened. Soleil stirred then. Just a small movement, her head shifting slightly against the towel. Her ears flattened, then relaxed. She didn't open her eyes, but her paw stretched out, slow and clumsy, until it rested against Raphael's wrist. The contact was so light it could have been an accident. But Raphael felt it like a hand reaching out of a dark place. He didn't move. He didn't want to break it. Amara saw it, too. Her throat worked as she swallowed. "She knows you," Amara said softly. Raphael's voice cracked. "She doesn't know anything." Amara shook her head. "That's not true. Animals know warmth. They know the difference between harm and help. They know who stayed." Raphael looked down at Soleil, at the oil stains still clinging to her fur like bruises. "Then I'll stay," he said. Amara's eyes narrowed. "For how long?" Raphael didn't answer because he didn't have one. He only had the next breath, the next swallow, the next minute she chose to keep fighting. The afternoon. Light shifted, turning the room amber. Amara stepped outside to check the horizon. Raphael stayed with Soleil, wiping her face, whispering words she couldn't understand but might still feel. "You're not alone," he murmured. "Not anymore." As the sun began to drop again, Amara returned, dust on her boots, tension in her shoulders. "We need to move her tonight," she said, "to the ranger station. It's farther but safer. It has clean water, a generator, medical supplies." Raphael nodded, already preparing himself. "Can she handle the drive?" Amara looked at Soleil, then back at him. "If we keep her warm. If we go slow?" Raphael's gaze lingered on the cub's face. Her breathing was steadier now, still fragile, but no longer fading like smoke. He lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. Soleil didn't resist. She simply leaned into the heat, eyes closed, trusting something she couldn't name. Amara opened the door, and the desert wind rushed in like a warning. Raphael stepped out with Soleil held tight, and for the first time in years he felt the edge of a different kind of fear. Not the fear of arriving too late, the fear of arriving on time. And realizing what it might cost to stay. The road east was little more than a suggestion drawn in gravel and ghost tracks. Raphael drove slow, hands tight on the wheel, headlights slicing through the thinning dusk like a knife across old paper. Amara sat in the passenger seat, Soleil cradled in her lap under the thermal blanket, her body still fragile, her breath shallow but no longer panicked. In the quiet between bumps, Raphael could hear her breathing. Each one was like a small promise. She had survived the oil. She had survived the night. But the desert still waited. The ranger station wasn't far in miles, but the road twisted, and the night brought a different kind of danger. Amara kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching dust kick up behind them. "I don't like this," she muttered. "You think someone's following?" "I think someone's watching." The words made the air colder. They arrived after nightfall. The building sat on a flat patch of land between a dried creek and a slope of cracked earth. It was sturdier than the last place. Solar panels covered in dust, an antenna, a steel door with a keycard lock Amara overrode with a manual bypass. Inside it smelled like sealed wood and old reports. Soleil stirred when the warmth hit her. Her ears twitched beneath the edge of the blanket. Raphael carried her in, laid her gently on a cot Amara had set up in the corner, layered with towels and folded jackets. She blinked once, just once, but her eyes found Raphael's face, and stayed there. "You saw that, right?" Raphael said. Amara, rummaging through a crate of medical supplies, paused. "Yeah, she knows you." He didn't answer. There was something about being needed that hurt more than being forgotten. Amara returned with a small bottle of saline and a new feeding syringe. "Let's try again. Her vitals are weak, but if she can keep this down—" She didn't finish the sentence. Hope didn't need to be spoken aloud. They worked in tandem. Raphael whispered to Soleil, let her nuzzle against his palm. Amara gave her fluids, a little bit at a time, slow and careful. An hour passed, then 2. And then the thing neither of them expected happened. Soleil whimpered, not a cry, not pain, a sound that had no business in the throat of something that had come so close to death. It sounded like longing. "She's waking up," Amara said softly. Raphael nodded. He sat beside her, motionless except for the hand resting near her paw. "I didn't think we'd get this far," he admitted. "Neither did I." A beat. Then Amara asked, "So what happens now?" Raphael didn't know how to answer. They'd both been so focused on keeping the cub alive, on the next breath, the next sip, the next hour, that they hadn't dared think about after. He looked at the small bundle of fur and bruises. "We keep going," he said. "As long as she wants to live, we stay." "You know that's not enough," Amara said gently. "She's a lion. She's wild. You can't keep her in a ranger station." "I'm not keeping her." "Then what are you doing?" Raphael didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. All he knew was the weight of her heartbeat under his hand, and how for the first time in years something small and helpless had reached for him and not disappeared. Soleil shifted again, her claws flexing weakly. Raphael moved to adjust the blanket and noticed something new. Her body wasn't as cold anymore. She was holding heat. Her muscles were less rigid. Her breathing had rhythm. "She's stabilizing," Amara said, checking her again. "This is good." Raphael nodded slowly, his eyes not leaving Soleil's face. In the back of his mind, another memory surfaced. Not of the fire, not of Mateo, but of a night before all of it, sitting in the hallway with his kid brother, building Lego towers that reached higher than their knees. Mateo had dropped a piece, cried. Raphael picked it up and gave it back. He hadn't thought about that moment in years. But now, watching Soleil sleep, he felt it again, that simple act of giving someone what they needed before they could ask. He stood, stepped outside to clear his head. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, stars scattered across the sky like someone had broken a mirror over the earth. The kind of night that made you feel both small and infinite. Amara joined him a minute later. "Clear night," she said. "Too clear," he replied. She raised an eyebrow. "You think someone's coming?" "I think something always is." She didn't challenge it, just stood there beside him, arms folded, watching the dark. "I meant to ask you," she said. "Why the name?" "Soleil?" he asked. She nodded. He looked up at the stars. "It means alone." She studied his face for a moment. Maybe it used to. They stood there, two people from different lives, bound by one, small creature fighting for hers. Neither of them had planned this. Neither of them wanted it. But it had arrived anyway, like a test of something they'd forgotten they had. Inside, Soleil stirred again. A low, soft sound. Not fear, not hunger, just presence. "I think she wants us," Raphael said quietly. Amara's reply was just as soft. "I think we want her too." Back inside, the cot had shifted slightly. Soleil had pushed herself halfway upright, front paws tucked beneath her like a sphinx. Her head wobbled, but her eyes were open now, fully. clearer than before. When she saw Raphael, she didn't flinch. She made a small noise, barely a chirp. He knelt in front of her. "Hey," he whispered. She blinked slowly, then lifted one paw and rested it on his hand. The contact was feather-light, but it was real, and in that moment, Raphael knew he would do anything, to protect this life, even if it meant losing her in the end, especially then. He didn't say it out loud, but he thought it. We only had each other, and for now, that was enough. The first step wasn't graceful. It was more like a collapse that didn't quite hit the floor, legs that buckled, then fought their way back. Solea stood for 3 full seconds before her front paw slid, and she sat down, startled and indignant. Her ears flattened, and she made a small sound that might have been frustration or maybe just confusion. But she had stood. Raphael had seen people walk out of burning buildings. He'd seen children emerge from smoke, coughing and alive. He'd even seen men stagger from the edge of explosions with nothing but adrenaline keeping them upright. But this was different. This was a creature who wasn't supposed to be here. A creature that had given up breathing, stopped fighting, and still, somehow, got back on her feet. Amara watched from across the room, leaning against the old cabinet. She'd turned into a makeshift supply station. She didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Solea tried again. This time she lasted 6 seconds before her back legs gave out. She let out a chirp that sounded halfway between complaint and challenge. Raphael crouched beside her. "Easy," he said softly. "You've earned the right to go slow." Solea flicked her tail, which was more like a smudge of movement, but it was enough. Her body still bore the signs of what she'd endured. Fur patchy, scars along her flank where the oil had burned, black residue clinging to the edges of her paws. But her eyes, they were different now, clearer, present. It was the first day of something new, though none of them knew what to call it. Later that afternoon, Raphael carried her outside, wrapped in a towel. The sun had softened, no longer the harsh flame it had been the day they met. Now it felt like warmth, something kind. He set her down on a patch of shaded dirt near the side of the station. Solea sniffed the air, ears turning toward distant sounds. A bird, a breeze, life. Amara joined them, sitting nearby with the Aindas small notebook in hand. She wasn't writing, just holding it, the way people do when they need something familiar to ground them. "She's alert," she said. Raphael nodded. "She knows where she is." Amara looked over at him. "And do you?" He didn't answer. Solea tried to stand again. This time she managed 3 wobbly steps before collapsing, her head resting in the crook of her own leg. She didn't whimper, didn't cry. She was learning. That night, Raphael boiled water on the propane stove and sterilized the syringe. Amara prepped another mixture of electrolytes and gel calories. They worked in silence, as they always did now, like 2 sides of the same pulse, keeping it steady. When Solea finished feeding, she nuzzled against Raphael's shirt, then turned toward Amara, touching her nose to the ranger's hand. The gesture was small, brief. But Amara's face shifted. That night, as the desert cooled and the generator hummed quietly in the background, Raphael stepped outside alone. He looked up at the stars, letting the night press against him. He hadn't called anyone, not since arriving. Not even his mother, who still left voicemails he didn't listen to. Not since Mateo. For years, he hadn't been able to speak about it, not even in therapy, not even in dreams. But now, with a lion cub asleep inside and a ranger who didn't walk away, standing watch over them both, he felt the pressure change, just slightly, like a door cracking open. The next morning, Solea walked 10 steps without falling. Raphael cheered quietly. Amara clapped once, then caught herself, turning away like she hadn't meant to react. Solea, oblivious to their awe, pounced on a ball of gauze, and rolled onto her side like the kitten she still was. The moment felt like something sacred. Later, while cleaning a bottle near the sink, Raphael said, "Do you think she remembers the pit?" Amara, seated nearby with a map, didn't look up. "I think animals remember pain. But do they remember who brought them out of it?" Amara finally looked at him. "Sometimes, but that's not what matters." Raphael waited. "What matters," she said, "is who stayed afterward." He didn't reply. That evening he sat beside Solea as she dozed on her blanket. Her breathing was deep now, steady. A rhythm. Raphael let his hand rest on her side, feeling the rise and fall, counting each movement the way he had when it had been all that kept her alive. 3 minutes. That's all he had lost, all those years ago. 3 minutes that had carved a canyon inside him. But with Solea, it was different. He had been there. He had stayed. Later, in the quiet, he whispered, "You saved me too, didn't you?" Solea didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her breathing was enough. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with silence. Not the kind that soothed, but the kind that warned, the kind that settled over the land like a predator, just beyond sight, waiting to strike. Amara was the first to notice it. That morning, while Raphael was boiling water and Solea was batting a ragged towel like it was prey, Amara stepped outside and didn't come back in for a long time. When she returned, her face was unreadable. "I found tracks," she said, voice low. "Big ones." Raphael glanced up from the stove. "Poachers?" She shook her head. "Not human, but fresh, deep, wide-set, adult lioness." He froze. "Here?" Amara nodded slowly. "A half-mile north near the dried arroyo. They're not random. She's moving through the territory like she's searching." Raphael set the pot down. The stove clicked off. The weight in his chest shifted, hard to name, harder to ignore. Could it be? He didn't finish the sentence. Amara did it. For him. Her mother? Maybe. Solea rolled on her side, legs outstretched, belly exposed. Her ribs weren't as sharp anymore. She'd gained weight, just a little. Her coat still bore traces of what she'd endured, but she moved with more confidence, more curiosity. Each day brought more strength, and with it, more questions Raphael didn't want to ask. Amara dropped her backpack on the table. "I'm setting up cameras." Raphael raised an eyebrow. "Motion-activated trail cams," she said. "I've got 6. I'll place them in a 2-mile radius from the pit where we found her. If there's a lioness looking, she'll pass through again." Raphael didn't argue. He just nodded, then looked back at Solea. The idea of losing her now was unbearable. She had become more than a rescue, more than a survivor. She had become a tether to something older than grief, something softer than guilt. But logic spoke louder than emotion. He knew what Amara was doing wasn't just necessary, it was right. "She needs her kind," she said gently. "We both know that." He sat beside Solea, letting her nuzzle against his leg. "What if the mother doesn't accept her?" Amara looked at him. "Then we cross that bridge when we get there." That night, while Amara trekked through the brush setting up cameras, Raphael stayed behind with Solea. He watched her test her balance on a makeshift ramp he'd built from old wood, stumbling and catching herself with determination that made his chest ache. She was learning to move again, and he was learning to let go. Amara returned late, dirt-streaked and sweating. She collapsed onto the floor with a water bottle and a half-smile. "Cameras are up," she said. "Now we wait." For the next 2 days they lived in a kind of suspended quiet. Raphael kept to his routine, cleaning, preparing food, caring for Solea. Amara downloaded footage from the cameras each evening, sifting through frames like "Searching for Ghosts," Mostly it was dust, rodents, a fox, once a condor, nothing that mattered, until the third night. Amara burst through the door, breath caught in her chest. "She's there." Raphael looked up. "What?" Amara shoved the camera into his hands. On the tiny screen, grainy and washed in infrared, an adult lioness walked into frame. Large, powerful, eyes glowing from the flash. She paused, sniffed the ground, turned toward the camera, and stared, as if she knew. Raphael's throat tightened. He studied the timestamp. Just hours ago. "She's close," Amara whispered, "and she's still looking." The idea hit him like a punch. This wasn't a wild animal passing through. This was a mother, still searching, still hoping, still not giving up, just like Soleil hadn't, just like he hadn't. Raphael looked at the cub, now asleep near the door, her breathing slow and peaceful. She didn't know any of this, couldn't understand the war being fought, in the space between what was fair and what was right. Amara crouched beside him. "We could try a controlled reunion?" He didn't respond. "Bring her to the clearing where the mother was seen," she continued. "Keep distance. See what happens. No risks." "She's not ready," Raphael said. "She's still recovering. She's stronger than you think. She still needs me. Or maybe you still need her." The words landed like a blade. Raphael stood, walked to the window. Outside, the stars blinked with quiet indifference. The desert didn't care who hurt, who healed, who stayed behind. Amara didn't press him. She just said, "We'll wait a few days. Let her decide." And that's what they did. They waited. Soleil grew more curious, explored more. Her muscles gained definition. She stalked leaves, shadows, Raphael's boots. She chirped at Amara in the morning and curled up beside Raphael at night. Each movement she made said the same thing: "I'm not done yet." But every time Amara showed him another camera frame, another glimpse of the lioness moving through dust and thorn, pausing, sniffing, searching, he felt the clock ticking. On the sixth day, Soleil did something she hadn't done before. She climbed. It wasn't far, just a stack of boxes beside the window. But she used her hind legs, pulled herself up, balanced. She stood there, tail twitching, gold eyes scanning the dark beyond the glass. Then she chirped, a soft, steady call that echoed through the room. Raphael looked at Amara. "That wasn't for us," she said. "No, it was a call sent out into the wild. A question. Are you still there?" Raphael's hands trembled slightly as he reached for her. Soleil didn't resist. She crawled into his lap, curled into herself like a question mark. He held her tighter than he meant to. He wanted to believe she didn't understand what was coming. But deep down, he knew she did. That night, when the ice wind picked up and the stars dimmed behind a thin veil of dust, Raphael stood beside Soleil's bed and whispered the words he hadn't spoken aloud in years. "I love you." She didn't move, didn't need to. The next morning, he packed a bag, just in case. The sun hadn't yet risen when Raphael loaded Soleil into the truck. He'd lined the back seat with thick blankets, layering warmth and familiarity. His jacket, the towel she first slept in, even the old sweatshirt that still smelled faintly of smoke. And him. She climbed in on her own this time, her paws steady, her movements careful. She didn't look back at the station. That was his job. Amara closed the rear door and stood beside him without speaking. The morning was still, the air cold enough to bite. Behind them, the ranger station sat quiet, holding the last weeks of struggle and healing in its wooden bones. Raphael looked at Soleil through the glass. She sat facing forward, alert but calm, eyes fixed on the horizon like she already knew where they were going. "She's ready," Amara said softly. "I'm not," Raphael replied. Amara didn't argue. She just handed him the GPS, preloaded with the camera trap locations and the precise clearing where the lioness had last appeared. "If anything goes wrong," she said, "you call me." He nodded, then hesitated. "You'll stay close?" "I'll be 3 minutes behind." 3 minutes. Raphael swallowed hard and climbed into the driver's seat. He didn't look in the mirror again until they were halfway down the trail. By then, Amara had already disappeared behind a hill. The desert was wide awake now, light unfolding slowly across the cracked earth, bringing heat and clarity with it. Birds circled overhead. Far off, a fox dashed between rocks, life moving around them, above them, indifferent. But Raphael's world had narrowed to one small lion cub in the seat behind him. Solea didn't make a sound during the drive. She lay with her head on her paws, but her eyes didn't close. Every turn in the road, every shadow she watched, as if she were waiting. The clearing was exactly how the camera footage had shown it, open, surrounded by low shrubs and thorn trees with a slope of rock, forming one side like a natural wall. It was quiet, but not empty. Raphael stepped out first, stretching the stiffness from his legs. The wind carried a scent he couldn't name, wild and heavy and old. He opened the rear door slowly. Solea looked up. Their eyes met. "You don't have to go," Raphael whispered. But she was already moving. She hopped down carefully, landing with more grace than he expected. She walked a few steps, paused, sniffed the air. Her tail lifted slightly, unsure. Her ears flicked toward every sound. She didn't run, didn't cry, just waited. Raphael kept his distance. He didn't want to rush her. He didn't even want to breathe too loudly. This was her moment, not his. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Nothing. The wind shifted, and then, like it had always been there, waiting, a shape emerged from the scrub. Golden, silent, bigger than Raphael imagined. The lioness moved like a ripple in tall grass, muscles coiled and elegant. She paused, just beyond the clearing, staring, straight at Solea. Solea didn't move, but her tail quivered, her head tilted, her body leaned forward, not running, not retreating. Then came the sound. A soft, high-pitched chirp. Raphael's heart stopped. It was the same sound Solea had made when she saw him for the first time after waking. But this wasn't for him. This was a call. And the lioness answered. She stepped into the clearing fully now, eyes locked on the cub, her posture tense, but not aggressive. She stopped 10 feet away, nose working, reading every scent. Solea took 1 step forward, then 2. Then she ran. The lioness didn't flinch. She took the impact as Solea crashed into her front legs, buried her face in the familiar scent of a mother who never stopped looking. The lioness lowered her head, nuzzled, sniffed, licked. Solea climbed onto her back, rolled off, chirped again. Raphael felt something inside him collapse. It wasn't grief. It wasn't joy. It was the weight of holding something too long, and finally letting go. He turned to leave. But then it happened. The lioness looked up, looked at him, and walked forward. She stopped just a few feet away, closer than any wild lion had a right to be. Raphael didn't move, didn't breathe. She stood tall, eyes deep and unreadable, and then, slowly, deliberately, she dipped her head. Not a bow, not submission, but something else. Recognition. Raphael's throat burned. He whispered, "You found her." The lioness turned and returned to her cub. Solea followed, climbing into the tall grass beside her. They moved as one, disappearing like ghosts back into the world that had nearly killed her. He stood there long after they vanished, unsure how long had passed. When Amara arrived, he didn't speak, just handed her the GPS and sat on a rock. She didn't press him. After a long silence, she said, "You did the unthinkable." "No," Raphael murmured. "She did." The sky above them was pale and endless. The pit was behind them, and in the space where silence once meant death, now it meant something else entirely: hope. The ranger station was quiet the morning Raphael returned to the clearing. 3 weeks had passed since he last stood there. 21 sunrises. Enough time for the desert to reclaim its rhythm. The camera traps had long been pulled, the prints in the dust erased by wind and passing animals. No signs remained of the moment that had broken and rebuilt him all at once, and yet something in the air still remembered. He walked slowly, carefully, each step measured not by caution, but by reverence. He stopped where Solea had stood before running into her mother's chest. The ground bore no trace of her small paws anymore, but Raphael could still feel them in memory, unsteady but determined. She had been so light in his arms, and yet the weight of her, it had shifted his entire life. He dropped his bag and sat in the dirt, watching the tree line. He didn't expect her to appear. He wasn't there for that. This was something else. A kind of closing, a kind of keeping. He'd been helping Amara since the reunion, officially unofficial, unpaid. But she called him partner now, not volunteer. And he hadn't left. The desert had a strange way of giving a man space to grow back into himself. They'd spent their mornings checking trails, logging sightings, monitoring water holes. At night, they'd talk in the half-dark about the things no one else stayed long enough to listen to, how many animals had vanished before anyone noticed, how many reports were ignored, how easy it was for an ecosystem to collapse when no one stood guard. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, they'd hear a sound in the distance, a roar that didn't belong to any machine or coyote. Low, full, alive. Amara always paused when she heard it. She never said anything, just listened. They both knew what it meant. Solea was still out there, still alive, still wild. It had taken days after the reunion for Raphael to breathe without hurting. He'd kept waiting, for regret to find him, for that empty, echoing loss to return the way it had after Matteo. But it hadn't, because Sola hadn't been taken from him. He had let her go, and that changed everything. He pulled a folded photograph from his jacket pocket, creased, faded. Matteo in a red soccer jersey, grinning with 2 front teeth missing. He'd carried this photo for years, never looking at it, just keeping it, as if holding on to the image was penance enough for the seconds he'd lost. But now Raphael looked at it, really looked. "I couldn't save you," he whispered, voice rough. "But I saved her." He wiped a thumb over the edge of the picture. "I hope that's enough." The wind stirred the brush. Somewhere beyond it, birds called. The same desert that had almost swallowed Solea now kept her. Raphael liked to believe it treated her differently, gently, as if it too remembered. Amara had told him once, "Animals forget, they have to. It's the only way. They survive." He'd nodded at the time, but now, sitting alone in that same space, he wasn't so sure. Maybe she wouldn't remember him. Not really. Not in the way humans do. Not name or face or voice, but maybe deep inside the part of her that ran and hunted and climbed trees in silence, there would always be something. A reflex, a warmth, a trust that had no origin. A shadow of a man who had pulled her from death and taught her how to live. And maybe that was enough. He stayed until the sun reached its highest point, then stood, dusted off his jeans, and shouldered his pack. Back at the station, Amara waited. She stood near the fence, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. "She show up?" she asked. Raphael shook his head. "Didn't expect her to." Amara didn't press. "You going to take the job?" He hadn't answered the first 5 times she'd asked, but now he did. "I already did." She smiled. "Good. I told the agency you're my second. Ranger now. They're sending the badge." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's legal?" I'm sure I don't care." He laughed. It came easier now. He'd started laughing again sometime between the 5th day after Solea left and the morning he woke without dreaming of the oil pit. That night, after dinner, he sat on the roof of the station, watching the stars bloom over the desert like they did every night. Familiar, indifferent, constant. He held Mateo's photo again, not out of guilt, but out of memory. Not every loss has to stay an open wound. Some can become something else, a reminder, a reason, a quiet, steady light pointing forward. He tucked the photo into his journal, closed it, and looked out toward the wild. He imagined Solea crouched in the tall grass, eyes locked on a rabbit, muscles tight, tail low, wind in her fur, not thinking about the past, not needing to. She didn't remember him, but she remembered how to survive. And maybe, because of him, how to trust something once in a while, too. It was enough. The desert didn't promise happy endings, but sometimes it gave you second chances. Sometimes the thing you save is the thing that saves you. And sometimes not being remembered is the greatest gift of all, because it means they never had to remember the pain you pulled them from. They only remember being free and alive.